I guess that we're going to do another exercise video this week. I hope you enjoyed the one last week and on the split squats and lunges, and the one thing modification you can do to enhance those a little bit. So if you didn't see last week's video on that, please go check that out. That was a really good one. This week we're going to do something a little bit different, tackle something a little bit different here, a different exercise. And this week we're going to talk about pressing overhead. Very few people, including myself, spend a lot of time reaching above their head, right? And even doing something like this can be quite challenging for a lot of people, right? If you just stand up and try to like raise your arms up over your head, a lot of people, including myself, have a number of compensations that they can go through, right? For me, what I tend to do when I try to go overhead or reach overhead is I will try and flare my ribs out and extend my back and to get my hands up over my head. So like if I'm not conscious about it, for example, I'll stick my chest out as I go overhead, right? But what you really want to do is like this should all stay nice and still and very much aligned as you reach up over your head, right? And so I need to be very conscious about holding my abs tight, holding my chest tight, making this a solid, stiff base as I go overhead, right? And lots of times people will have compensations in their shoulder. One shoulder may be able to go overhead better than the other one. One arm's better than the other. So you might see discrepancies on different sides of the body, depending on which one is more mobile than the other. But despite all the challenges that we have about reaching overhead, it's still important to incorporate exercises that reach over the head. And traditionally, we see the most quintessential overhead exercise is some type of overhead press, right? So really strong guys, they'll take a barbell and they'll press overhead. And that's a great exercise, like super good exercise. You have to be very strong, very mobile. But if you can do it, it's a really great exercise, something I am not very good at all. I do it from time to time. I incorporate it in my routine. But like I said, I have a lot of compensations about getting my hands over my head. And when you have a barbell, it's even tougher. And so I look for ways of doing overhead exercises that help me take away my compensations. So without me necessarily having to thinking about it or trying really hard, so that I can press over my head without having to compensate, right? And so one of the exercises that I was actually made aware of a long time ago is called a Z press, right? And basically, this is a way of pressing overhead where you can't really compensate much at all, right? The other compensation that people will do, if regardless of shoulder mobility or their ability to reach over their head, that type of thing, is when the weight gets heavy, they start to incorporate their legs, right? Like they're going to push through the floor to get the weight up over their head, right? Especially men, and that's actually a form. It's not a strict press. It's a push press, right? And there's a time and place to use a little bit of momentum, just like any time and place. If you're lifting something heavy, you can use momentum to your advantage. You can use a push press as an exercise. If you look up, there is a push press exercise for pushing overhead. But lots of times people are just doing it because of ego, right? Especially guys, we want to lift heavy things. And so we're lifting more weight than we really could comfortably lift. And we start to incorporate a lot of momentum to get the weight up to the position it needs to be. So one way I like to press overhead, but take away all the compensations that we might have when doing so, is do something called a Z press, right? And a Z press is really simple, but very hard. If you're used to pushing a lot of weight over your head and you try to do a Z press, it's going to be very humbling for you. So be aware of that ahead of time, right? Z press, basically you get on the floor and you sit down, your legs straight out in as straight posture as you can. You get your weight, so you can use anything you want for this Z press. You can use dumbbells, you can use kettlebells, you can use a barbell. A barbell is a little bit tricky, or can be a bit tricky for people because you gotta get the barbell up to your chest, basically. If you have a rack like I do behind me and you have some safeties, you can put it on the safeties and lift from there, lower the safeties down if you're gonna use a barbell. But for beginners, I like a dumbbell or a kettlebell because they're not worrying about trying to get the whole barbell up to their chest or anything like that. But you can use a barbell if you want. So I have two dumbbells here, so I'm just gonna do it with dumbbells. And you can either do a traditional press like this, but you're going to keep your feet out, back straight as possible, press overhead, right? And that's pretty much the Z press. But what is this doing? My legs are completely removed from this exercise. Like, I can't use my legs at all. I can't use my legs to push the weight up overhead if it's heavy. I'm not using my legs to stabilize. And because I'm sitting, and I'm straight up, I have to use my core to hold my body straight up. So it eliminates me from sticking my chest. I can't like stick my chest out sitting like I could if I was standing up. I just can't do it. It's just, I could do it a little bit, but I can't do it a lot like I would if I was standing straight up on my feet. And so it takes away all these compensation mechanisms that people have when they go overhead, and it really just leaves pressing overhead. So you can focus on the thing that you really want and do it with proper form and technique without having to try to worry about all the compensations that you might be doing if you're standing up and using heavy weight. The weight is going to be light. It's going to be hard. Even if you don't have any compensations when pressing overhead, you're going to have to lighten the load a little bit because, again, you're not in an optimal position for pressing overhead. So it makes it harder. It makes it harder. So again, you can press like this. You can also do one arm, right? If you want, which again, that's going to force more core stability because you're weighted on one side. You can do alternating. So you can go one arm and the other, right? So there's lots of different variations. Pretty much any variation that you would pressing overhead, you could do with the Z press. And you might be asking, what about, how is this different from like in a seated position? If I'm seated on a bench or in a chair or something like that, pressing. It's a little different because if the seat you're on has a back to it, you can use that back to your advantage, right? You might not consciously do it, but you might be pushing into the floor, pushing your back up against the seat, which in some ways is a good thing, but that's providing a little bit more stability, more force, and you can push more weight that way. When you don't have any back and you don't have your legs pushing into the ground and you're just left with your pretty much the upper half of your body to move the weight, it just makes it a lot harder and forces a little bit more stability, it removes all the crutches basically from the exercise, which is very challenging. Try that out. It's called the Z press. Basically, you just sit on the floor, grab a kettlebell, dumbbell, barbell, whatever you want, and just press overhead. And you just want to make sure you're straight up and down, upright like this, and you're going to press overhead. It's super challenging, but really good for dealing with the compensations that a lot of people have when they press overhead. So let me know what you think about this one. As always, really love your feedback. Leave comments below or send me a direct message if you have any questions or comments about this. And as always, if you want to keep up with all the content that I'm putting out on a weekly basis, including these videos, blog posts, etc., please go to my website, rjbhealth.coach. Click on the newsletter link at the top, enter your email address, and you can sign up for the newsletter. I'll just email this stuff to you every week. And I still have a spot open for one-on-one coaching. So if you are interested in coaching, please reach out to me. You can go to my website at rjbhealth.coach. Click on the schedule discovery call button, fill out that form, and I'll get back to you and we can talk a little bit more about coaching, or just send me a message and say, hey, Ryan, I'm interested in maybe working with you, got some questions, and we can spend some time chatting about that as well. But look forward to talking to you all soon. Next week, I won't have a video for you because I'm going to be on vacation. My family and I are heading to Puerto Rico, so I won't be putting out any content next week, but the week after, I'll be back with another video, blog post, newsletter, regular scheduled content as always.